Good evening. On behalf of Barrington Books, we welcome you to the Rhode Island stop of the Glimmer of Hope book tour. Our special guests tonight are March for Our Lives founders Matt Deitsch, Ryan Deitsch, and Sophie Whitney. Our moderator is Halima Ibrahim from Rhode Island. A quick shout out to Cranston High School East staff and the Cranston Police Department for use of the school tonight. Glimmer of Hope is the official, definitive book tour from the March for Our Lives founders. Glimmer of Hope tells the story of how a group of teenagers raced to channel their rage and sorrow into action, and went on to create one of the largest youth-led movements in global history. In keeping with their ongoing efforts to end gun violence in all communities, the student leaders of March for Our Lives have decided not to be paid as authors of the book. 100% of net proceeds from this book will be paid to March for Our Lives Action Fund. Let's show our appreciation with a round of applause to our guests tonight.
My name is Halima Ibrahim. I'll be the moderator this morning. You may know me for my poem, Wake Up, that I read at the local March for Our Lives rally. The reason why this movement in particular inspired me to speak up is because I'm a victim of gun violence myself. Not necessarily how we know it here in the US, but I lived in Egypt during the Arab Springs. My family and I evacuated 10 days in. I was left with severe PTSD afterwards. When I enrolled back into public school here, I remember the lockdown drills especially bothered me. I didn't think, excuse me. I just came back from an almost war-torn country to realize that it wasn't safe here either. I didn't think anything much about it. I had kind of accepted how everything was. So when the students of Marjorie Stoneman Douglas spoke up about this issue, the anger and fear that I had felt back in 2011 resurfaced, but so did hope for a safer future. And I wanted to help make happen. So thank you guys. First question is, this movement started basically with a few people in a living room, right? So what was basically the first meeting, what did you speak mostly? What was the first meeting like in Cameron's house, and when did you come up with the idea of March?
It's all kind of a blur for me. The book, we put it more into words, but I think the first time we all really met was on February 16th, which was 2 days after the shooting, and we all just had this collective sense of hopelessness and just anger, because we were just really angry. Kids get really angry when things don't go their way, and when things get this bad, all hell breaks loose. So we sat in Cameron's living room, 5 or 6 of us, all night long, just trying to figure out any way for people to listen, because we had this platform now, and people were listening all across the country. We had platforms on social media now, starting Never Again on February 16th, and we knew that the American people needed a specific task to do, or all of this would be for nothing. So that's kind of why we came up with the march, because marching is something that people can look forward to, they can do it, it can impact them, and then it'll hopefully inspire them to continue their activism.
So, you said briefly in the book that the Women's March you got the idea for the actual march on Washington through that. Did you have any other specific movements that kind of inspired this as well?
Immediately after the shooting happened, I couldn't sleep that night because we didn't know how many people had been killed or who had died. it was mostly just a Twitter feed of like who was looking for people. And so I was up late, and it was like 3 a.m. and I started reading news articles from Columbine and Sandy Hook and Stoneman Douglas, and the language was exactly the same. Even the interviews with the students were worded exactly the same. The reactions, the adverbs, the adjectives, everything matched article after article. And I was trying to find a time in like history where like the messages swapped. Like when can you move the needle? When can you stop this course of like repetitive thoughts and prayers, no action, people pretend to care, and I didn't have an answer right away, and I felt helpless because that was sort of the cycle that I felt going on. And then when we all came together, and there was like the first like big meeting when there was like 25 of us, and Cam was in Ghostbusters pajamas, and there's a BuzzFeed reporter in there, and the only reason she was there was because she kind of looked like Delaney, and someone thought she was Delaney, so she was allowed in, and there's actually pictures of this meeting, which is super strange. And we were just talking about the march, and we thought, how many people can we actually get to the march? And I remember the first number we came up with was 90. We're like, we could get 90 people to show up, it'll be really powerful. And we ended up with 1 million. And and we just studied what people have been able to do before us, whether it was in the civil rights movement with the March for Jobs and Equality that Martin Luther King led, or the Women's March the year before. We took these blueprints and we were like, how can we make this for us? How can we make this ours? And that's where like the Road to Change came from too. We studied the Freedom Riders, we studied the labor movement, and so we copied these sort of change-making blueprints and we adapted it for 2018. Like, how could you make this real now? Because we aren't taught this like it's recent. We aren't taught the civil rights movement like it happened in like people's lifetimes in this room. Like there's people in this room that lived through all of that, and we're taught it like it's such a distant memory. Like it's so out of touch with how we are living and acting now. And we aren't taught that they were 19-year-olds, 18-year-olds organizing these protests, organizing these rallies, organizing these marches, and doing the trainings themselves. And so all of these movements throughout our history as a country and as a people, we're standing on the shoulders of giants when we do this work. We wouldn't be able to do this work as effectively if it wasn't for the kids in Standing Rock, the kids in Ferguson, the kids after Trayvon Martin was shot and killed. These foundations for activism is what makes this movement so powerful, because we're connecting with all of these coalitions, whether it's John Lewis and Andrew Young, or Clifton Kinney from Ferguson, or Mike Brown Sr., and all these people who are doing this work because so many people have been investing so long in their lives for this. And you're like, how are these kids from Parkland doing it? How are they pulling this off? And the answer is because we're all in this together and we're all working towards this common goal, and we weren't afraid to learn from others. We weren't afraid to like take these lessons and run with them.
So that kind of brings me to different questions that I wanted to ask. Is you have all these kind of like activism icons, I guess, that that paved the road for this to actually happen. What did you have any specific like heroes that inspired you each to do this?
Well, I mean, like you said, definitely Representative John Lewis, who led protests in Selma, actually was one of the first beaten on Bloody Sunday, and he was, what, 19 at that point? He was 19 years old, organizing a protest just for equality, just for the right to be seen as another like human being in this country. And we, after the shooting, one thing that I made certain of was I was a school journalist, so I got to meet my congressman at a politics club meeting a few weeks earlier. So I started to build a relationship with him, and then after the shooting, I asked him if we could go to Congress to lobby. And we set up a trip, about 7, 8, 9 of us all went up to DC and met with about a third of Congress within 2 days. And John Lewis was the last meeting we had that, like, in one of the days, and he was the only congressman who came to the door and met us right away. Everybody else made us sit and wait, like they were just, they came in from the other room, they'd keep us sitting there for 5-10 minutes. He was right there, he opened the door, shook our hands, gave us hugs, and
That's Coca-Cola.
he offered us Coca-Cola. His district's in Atlanta, so
He had every flavor.
yeah. He was definitely one of my personal inspirations because of everything that he had done in his life, where he had just fought for simple equality, and then he finally got to the point where he is now a U.S. congressman.
So back to the whole meeting thing. Sophie, you were there, but Ryan and Matt, you weren't on like the first day. So how did you guys get involved with the rest of like the main people?
The night of the shooting, I got a call from Cam, and he asked me to design a logo because I was a film student in California, and a series of unfortunate events brought me home before the shooting happened. And so I was home in town, and I was actually working for my friend's t-shirt company. And so people thought I was a designer, but I was more of like a marketer strategist side of things. And so he called me, and he's like, I need a design to look professional. I know you do this. I'm like, I don't do that. And so I hooked him up with someone who could, and he had texted me multiple times to come over and help, and I just couldn't. I felt helpless. And it wasn't until like I said, I was working for this t-shirt company, and it was me and my friend Jamal. And if you guys have seen the flag shirts that we made with the QR code, that was Jamal. He's a rock star. Someone's wearing that? Yeah, right there. 50,000 people have used them to register people to vote, which is crazy. And we made it in the garage, and I love that you're wearing it. It's crazy. But Jamal and I had made these shirts, and we had been planning for 2 months to film a promo video for the shirts. It was a peace and war collection, so it was like peace written with a bomber jet and war written with flowers, and we were going to use them to fund microloans in war-impoverished nations. And our model was Joaquin Oliver, and Joaquin was killed on Wednesday at the shooting, and we were supposed to film the promotional material on Saturday. And so instead of filming it, we were at his funeral. And after his funeral, after seeing someone younger than me that I knew in an open casket, I knew I had to go and do something. I had to fight. I had to do something more with my energy than just mourn and feel helpless. And so I drove straight with my brother to Cameron's house, and that was the night of like the big meeting with everything. And I just wanted to do whatever I could to help. So I just started organizing whatever messaging or whatever research I could do. The first research I did was I looked up how shitty Marco Rubio's answer was to what he would do to stop shootings, and I was like, this is his answer. It's like a tenth of the way there. and then we were writing questions for like the CNN town hall, but it was just about people coming together that were still dealing with this trauma and trying to make something positive out of it in a very collaborative, creative consensus way, where we were all in this safe space, being able to like yell and scream and then laugh and like cry and like just get everything out there and try to make something powerful.
So I mentioned prior before that I lived in Egypt during 2011, and I wasn't really fully able to recover, process, or even really talk about what had happened for about 7 years, but you guys didn't even have like 24 hours. So how did you deal with your mental health while simultaneously having to like pick out a scab, basically?
I mean, I think activism and all of the things that we have done since the shooting was our way of grieving, because I know, speaking for myself, that if I didn't do anything, I probably would have been in a lot worse of a place than I am now because of my activism. It's just hard to sit alone with grief. For some people, I mean, at least for us, I guess, it's hard to sit there and grieve and not look towards the future and try and make it a positive way. So I think activism definitely like helped us. I'm not sure if any of us have truly grieved. I'm not sure if we ever will, because there's no like guideline on how to grieve when your school gets shot up, but we're doing our best.
One of the things that I think with the community that was really helpful is that even though we did not have that much time, even though we really just jumped right into this, that we were trying to make a difference, trying to make a change, make sure no other community had gone through what we went through. One thing that was really helpful in the beginning for the first few months was we had the memorials in our town. We had one at the school and then one at the local park where we held vigils. And those areas were very, very much a healing space for a lot of the community. It was somewhere where Parkland is this small town where no one really goes out, or really, like, you don't know your neighbor, you don't really know, like, much of the community other than, like, your close friend group. So for those memorials, there would be people just crying there and consoling each other up and through till April, when about they just took them away and put them in storage for now, waiting for a more permanent place. But definitely in the beginning, those memorials were some of the most helpful, as we actually spent one day, it was about a week after we had lobbied and been through the CNN town hall, and a lot of people were starting to bother us for a lot of different things, and we just wanted to clock out for the night. So we spent about, we said we'd spend about an hour at the memorial. We ended up spending about 7, in which none of us used our phones. We all just stood there in contemplation, looking at the names of the people that we had once known, that we had once seen in passing, that we had just known were an active part of our community. And it was, that is definitely some of the best healing that I personally have experienced, just being able to have that time. But right now it's incredibly hard because, like I said, the memorials just don't exist right now. There's no place for our community to actually get out all of these feelings.
With Mental Health Awareness Week being last week, and you talked about the memorials being really the main help, but with more long-term, do you have any advice for teens dealing with this sort of trauma, or really something to address with the stigma of mental health in regarding to gun violence?
For me, a lot of it comes back to, I have a friend, and this is a lesson I learned a while ago before this experience. His name's Jacob, and he lost both his parents at a very young age. He was like 12 or 13. And he said to me that the thing he hates the most is the crying contest, when people talk to each other about who has it worse and like who could be the more sad. And he's like, because I win every time and it sucks. And he goes, and it sucks to win that, and it sucks to lose it too. And I think about that when doing this work, because we go to communities that suffer from day-to-day gun violence. We go to places that had mass shootings decades ago. We go to places that had school shootings earlier this year that you guys would have no idea happened, because it was covered for half a day or not at all. And so a lot of what I do to deal with this trauma and the trauma I see around me is we just don't compare traumas. We just listen, we learn, we adapt, we come to an understanding as a consensus and as a group and as people just dealing with this, that the best thing we can do is actively try and prevent trauma, not compare it. And so that has been like the most valuable thing I've learned going around the country and speaking to people, is because we could be in, like we were in Iowa, and a woman told us about how she lost her daughter in a school shooting that wasn't covered. And she broke down and cried and like told us that like she finds hope in us, right? And we carry that every day. Like we carry everywhere we went, on the road to change, on the 63-day summer tour we did, every single day we heard another story of loss, another story of someone being killed in gun violence that never made the news, never made beyond like a Facebook post or something. And we learned that this is just something that is an American culture. Like this is ingrained in who we are as a nation, And until we stop comparing traumas and actively work to prevent them, we won't advance. And so, yeah, it's really straining and it sucks. Like, I can't pretend like we're all like super healthy and great and everything. Like, we're exhausted a lot of the time, but we understand that we're incredibly privileged to be able to do this work. And we're incredibly privileged to have a platform that we can actively fight to save lives. And people that are dealing with this trauma shouldn't feel the need to compare it to the other people that are dealing with trauma, but they should be able to learn from that trauma and learn ways to empower other people going through similar things. And notice that you don't have to be going through this to actively fight it.
So this seems like a good time to ask this. Sophie, there's a quote in the book that I find absolutely amazing, which is, people in America need a specific task or they won't do anything. I wondered if you would like to elaborate more on that.
I mean, yeah, there's a lot of people that, after the shooting, we had this influx of support and love from all over the country, all over the world. There were things being sent to us from schools in the middle of nowhere to our school with support and love. And all of these people want to help, but they're not going to go out of their way to find a task to do or find a way to help unless we gave them one. And that was what the march was, and that's what the Road to Change was, and that's what now our chapters that we're building out across the country, that's what that is for, because we want to give young people, and we want to give people of all ages the opportunity to use their voices because they are just as powerful. They just needed a little push, I think.
I think one of the big reasons why people don't really speak up or pay attention is because they don't really think their voices matter, or that they're just a kid and they won't have any influence or anything. But you've proven that our voices can be heard and can make a change as long as we're willing to fight for it. So I guess, could you give a little advice or wisdom, I guess, for young people who are still unsure that their voices matter, basically?
So I'm going to talk about a boy that we met in Sioux City, Iowa. His name is Langston. He is 10 years old, and he can pretty much talk politics around any single member of Congress. He sat down with me for about 10 minutes, and he taught me new things. He taught me a lot of new things. He has in his life spoken and debated with 3 governors. He won. He won all the debates. And
video.
Langston was not able to join the tour with us over this summer because his mom just couldn't let him go out. He's 10 years old, he needs to be with his family. But we were able to send him to Newtown for the end of the tour, in which he definitely had one of the best days of his life, in which he was able to meet so many other kids, so many other people that are like him, that are energized with this, that want to make a difference and are told maybe they're too young, maybe they don't know enough, but they can know more and they will know more, and eventually they will be in charge. Langston, I wish he was in charge.
How we ended the tour was with this huge rally in Newtown. We had 3,000, 4,000 people there, and the last speech, all the speeches were given by activists that have been working on this issue, especially people that had been a part of March for Our Lives, people who had spoken at the march, people who had been on the tour. But the last speech was given by Langston, Yolanda King, Martin Luther King's granddaughter, and Naomi Wadler. And Naomi just turned 12 yesterday. And they are the future, and people who are 18 right now are now. And if you're in between 12 and 18, you're at that, and you're on deck and you gotta get ready, because the truth is that 18 to 29 is the largest voting bloc in this country now. And young people who feel like my vote doesn't matter or they don't reflect me, that is a purposeful feeling that the people in power are enacting on you because they don't want you to feel part of this because you threaten them. You threaten their ideas. We said we met with a third of Congress. Most of them suck. Most of them couldn't talk or debate their way out of a conversation with us a week after everything had happened and we knew nothing about policy, and they still had no idea what was going on. Marco Rubio cried to us after we talked to him, and then he tweeted that we were arrogant. These are the people running our country, but not for long because of people like you guys. And the people, every single stop on our tour, a 14-year-old, a 15-year-old, a 9-year-old, 16-year-old would stand up and ask a question and say, I can't vote, how can I help? We got that every single day on the 63-day tour because they know that there's an answer. They know that there's a way that they can be active and make a difference even though they can't vote yet. And I always tell the story of the first week that we were organizing. This 11-year-old boy came up to us and said, I can't vote, what can I do? And we taught him how to register people to vote. Super simple, right? And so I gave him the flag design before it was on a shirt. I gave it to him on an iPhone. And I was like, if people scan this, you can register them to vote. Or you can do these forms and blah, blah, blah. Not gonna teach you guys how to register people to vote. If you wanna do that, do it on your own time. But I sent him off and he came back a week later and he's like, I suck at this. I only registered 32 people. This 11-year-old who couldn't vote got 32 votes. It doesn't matter how old you are, you can educate yourself and you can educate others and you can keep these important conversations going.
So I want to go back to the actual march. You said that you only really expected 90 people and you got 1 million. You also got a bunch of marches around the world. What was your reaction to that?
Over 800 marches, and there was one on every continent, even Antarctica.
March for Our Lives with penguins.
I still haven't processed that. I don't think I ever will, because every day, like how we just watched your speech, I'll see another person who spoke at their march, I get more inspired every single time. And just to think about how there's probably like 8,000 people's speeches that we'll never see that are just as inspiring and impacting people all over the world. It's crazy. I'll never process it.
There's a clip in Michael Moore's new documentary where our friend Dylan Bearline is responding to how many sibling marches we had, because the sibling march idea didn't come right away. That we were like, everyone needs to come to DC, and then they're like, some people can't, and we're like, okay. So we made the toolkit on how to have your own march and sent it out, and we got 30 in the first few days, 3 days, and we were like, okay, this is cool, this is neat, 30. And then in a week we had 600, and we're like, oh. And there's a video of Dylan going, so we have 600 marches, that's a lot of marches. and you're completely right, there's so much content out there that we'll never get to experience and be inspired by, but we know it's out there inspiring other people. And a statistic I really like to throw out there is that we had over 50 marches that had a higher attendance than any event Trump has ever done.
I want to get a time check. Okay. So I'll just go. So social media has played a big role within this whole movement. What do you think? Do you think you'd be able to get this much support without it?
Short answer is no.
Not a chance. Our whole movement was built off of social media. The things that I don't think we could have done anything without it. Maybe we could have had a local march with 9 people, but that's maybe it.
David's Twitter has gotten people running for office to drop out. That's crazy. And like, it's still happening. Like, and so like, with social media, hashtag never again was trending immediately. Like that was the first idea that the group came up with. They were like, okay, tell everyone you know to tweet hashtag never again at 3 p.m. We're gonna get it trending, 3 p.m. And I remember it vividly because it was the same day Drake dropped God's Plan, the music video. And so he was the #1 trend. And then it was God's Plan, never again, Russians. Because like 12 Russians got indicted. And I screenshotted it and it's still on my phone. But like, I just remember like, we were caught at that moment between Drake's God's Plan and 12 Russians getting indicted. I was like, people are talking about this.
Literally only have 2 more questions, so I don't know how much time we have left. And then I guess my joke question is, I'm a big reader, and this is a book event, so I'm guessing there's a lot of big readers in the audience as well. I believe that a person's favorite book can say a lot about the person, so I was wondering what each of your favorite books are.
You guys go first. I had to think about it.
I love Douglas Adams. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is like up there for me. Roger Zelazny is one of my favorite writers too. He wrote this series called The Nine Princes in Amber. It's sort of what George R. Martin credits Game of Thrones to, like inspiring that idea. So if you like Game of Thrones, Nine Princes of Amber is incredible and definitely inspires like a lot of my storytelling. And yeah, those are my favorite books.
Those were also some of my favorite, but I'll go a different route. Does anybody know the book series Kingdom Keepers at all? And it's a book series of it's young kids, Disney After Dark. It's a group of kids who get basically in Disney from this Imagineer tricks them into being in the park late at night, and they have to take down Maleficent, who has become sentient somehow and is now attacking the park.
It's like us.
So it's very inspirational to me in regards to activism. It shows that even a group of kids can take down a great evil, even if it was a cartoon.
I'm gonna go with the star in 1984.
Okay, so I'm laughing because that's his favorite book. So my last question is, what do you see for the hope of the future, see and hope for the future of this movement, and what can we do on state levels to push for change?
I'd say like a short-term goal would be having the highest youth voter turnout ever, which I hope is on the horizon.
That's gonna happen. I mean, we registered millions of people to vote, and if a third of them show up, if a fifth of them show up, then it's history. And so, largest youth turnout in the history of any election ever coming up on November 6th. Be there, be square. Bring your friends.
One thing we hope for after the election, we're going to change gears a little bit to focus a lot on our chapter organizations. We have about, 250 active chapters across the country. I've been working with about a dozen or so all across the world for international missions. What we really hope to do and hope to accomplish is not only get people registered and get people to actually vote, but to make sure that if young people want to actually be represented, that eventually they start to run themselves. This year especially, we've seen a lot of 18-year-olds run for local elections, and due to the Constitution, there's a bit of restrictions when it comes to federal, like congressmen or senators, or a president has to be 35, ridiculous. Really just... Not mentally, no. But
They've already done that one.
really, we just want to make sure that through those chapter organizations all across the country and all across the world, that we are teaching these young people how to run for themselves, how to actually take the power that they have and make just a positive impact on their community, and really just make sure that people everywhere have a voice.
Okay, so I'm going to start the Q&A now.
So, you want to tell them line up or something, or raise your hand?
Hi everyone, my name is Katie, I'm from Barrington Books. We are going to give you an opportunity to ask some questions. I am going to tell you, I am kind of want the students to ask first, if we could do that. I think we can all understand that. So what I'm going to ask you to do, if you want to line up here, and we'll get through as many as we can, and then we'll move on to the adults.
I just want to say I love your excitement in the first row. That was
My name is Eduardo Figueroa. What is your basic, what's your feelings about all the walkouts all across the country?
Short answer, incredible. Long answer, the greatest thing I've ever seen ever. This is the second time I mentioned, but in the Michael Moore doc, he filmed, basically if you don't know anything about Parkland, it's only about 25,000, 30,000 people in total, and the schools are huge. Douglas has about 3,000 to 3,500 students. Westglades, the middle school right next door, has about 2,000-ish students. And so a big chunk of the population is in those two places during the day. And when the walkout happened, the Westglade students walked out and the principal grabbed a megaphone and was like, "Go back to second period, go back to second," and they just walk away. And in the documentary, he has kids and they go, "They can't stop all of us." And that's how I felt seeing the walkouts, is they can't stop all of us. If we're all coming together to stop this cause, or to stop this issue, then we're gonna stop this issue. They can't stop all of us. And so that's how I felt about the walkouts. It was just so inspiring to see so many people join us in this and say, this is not normal, so we're not gonna act normal.
That principal, by the way, he followed them from the middle school to the park where one of the memorials were set up. That's about, that's like a 2.5 mile, 3 mile walk with a megaphone screaming at children. Don't know how he became a principal.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Miguel Figueroa, I'm his brother, and they can't stop all of us, and they didn't. So when I was one of the student leaders of the two walkouts that we did at our school, and the first one was a bureaucratic screw-up because the principal decided that, the principal kind of used his influence with the PA and the SRO to relegate a lot of the students into the auditorium and didn't allow us outside. 60 of us did make it outside, but that was of 200 students that showed up, which is pretty incredible. So the other students that were in the auditorium had these two poster boards. And one of them says, "We support Parkland," and the other says, "We will stay engaged," because activism cliche. And they signed them. So right here I have 142 signatures, and admittedly, some people signed it twice, such as myself. I was gonna mail them to you, and then you guys graduated, so I couldn't, but I did not think I would be able to present them to you in person, so I'm kind of nervous. You guys are inspirations, heroes, and legends, and from what I've heard, your book is awesome. So I hope you guys like it.
Thank you, legends.
I'm Michaela, and first I just wanted to thank you for coming out, because it's really important to my community. Alex Schachter's cousin went to my school, and we became friends, and I was able to talk to her a little about it, and I know that the activism that March for Our Lives inspired was really helpful for her and for her mom, who also worked at the school. And I just wanted to know, because now it's kind of on our generation to be activists, how are you doing with balancing your personal life but also maintaining such a big project like this?
Or like, are you still able to like maintain your own personal lives, or is it kind of?
I mean, because a lot of us were friends before this, so like you're doing activism and it's hard, but it's with people that you care about and that you've liked your whole life. Like I met a lot of these kids in like improv club at school, so like we just riff off each other a lot of the time, and like we're able to do the things we love while fighting for this right cause. Like I was a film student, like that was my dream. Like I told everyone I wanted to win an Oscar before I was 25. Like that was my goal. And like now I get to make PSAs with like whoever wants to make PSAs with us and like edit really cool videos. And like, yeah, it's awesome, but like I know I'm doing it for the right cause. And so it's like, it blends, like it becomes like your life.
And just make sure to surround yourself with people that you love and that support you when you're doing your activism. And also activism isn't just a one thing that you can do. Like whatever interests you, whatever is your passion, you can find a way to turn that into activism.
Just make sure on November 7th we all promised each other we're going to take a nap. So if we don't answer any direct messages or tweets at us or anything, we're sorry in advance.
Up to November 8th.
Thank you.
I'm Tori, and this is Bailey, and I have two questions, if you don't mind. But my first one is, what advice would you give for young kids, especially young girls who want to run for office or like get involved in the government level?
Do it, because we cannot continue to have this cycle of men deciding how women do anything anymore, because it's gotten ridiculous. But this election, there are more women running for office than ever before in the history of our country. Vote for them. More women at the table, more women being represented will lead to more women wanting to run, because no one's going to run for office if they don't see themselves represented. But we're getting more ladies in there, and it's so important. Please run for office. You. Okay, I don't know if you want to, I'm sorry.
And mobilize on the ground. Like be present, be accessible, get your volunteers to just love you and like believe in your mission and become one with like the message of what the people want. Because like so many people I know, so many 18-year-olds around the country, like we said, like there's 6 running for city council in Orange County, and the first time they get to vote is for themselves. And like that is the most powerful thing. And win or lose, like if you're fighting for what you believe in and you're fighting for the right thing, like no one can ever stop you.
My second question is, obviously like your activism, and most kids who are activists, like they see a lot of dark stuff, and like what you've been through is obviously very horrible. And I know like me personally, like you scroll through social media and now there's like this endless feed of things that almost seems like you're losing hope, you know, like you see like the bad upon the bad upon the bad. So what do you do when you're just kind of like you feel like you're at like your end? Like how could this get any worse? Like how do you bring that hope back into the conversation?
Well, I mean, to be perfectly honest, there have been a lot of times where we would just cry. There would be moments where I know the Great Mills High School shooting that happened before the march. We were actually set to speak at Harvard University that day, in which we had a full tour, a lot of people lined up to meet with us, and we actually took a few hour break specifically because that just hit us to our core. And it really made us like feel like we can't do this, like this is still happening no matter what we do. But we know that we just can't give up. Because that is what the people in power, that is what the people who are working against us on these issues want us to do. Like most of Congress doesn't speak about issues of gun violence on the floor. They don't speak about issues that involve young people on the floor of Congress. What they do instead is they'll give you lip service in a press conference or something, then go away. It's that we can't allow that to happen. Because we can't just if we do not speak out, if we stop speaking out, then we are complacent with that system. We are allowing it to occur.
Thank you. You guys are inspirations and leaders of our generation.
Yeah.
Hi, so my name is John Carmichael, and for a long time now, for about a year now, I've volunteered and I've worked for the Rhode Island Coalition Against Gun Violence, and I have a question for you guys today. So currently in Rhode Island, the Speaker of the House actually tweeted today that the Rhode Island Coalition Against Gun Violence, I believe the words he used were an extreme radical organization, and he's up for election. So we were wondering if you guys could help us out and just tweet at him, talk about it. If you could help us out, please.
Yeah.
Definitely share that with us. Most of our direct messages are open, so if there's anything specific, yeah. But like,
Imagine being against gun violence is radical.
And I have one more question. So I know you guys did so many stops on your tour over the summer. If you could relive one of the stops and just experience it one more time, what stop would it be?
Hard question. Standing Rock.
That was a powerful one.
Going to Standing Rock because if you're not familiar with what happened there, like look it up because it'll bring you to tears. The oil industry took away a lot of their holy land, and a lot of the protests were run and operated by young people as young as 12 years old, 11 years old, standing up to a militarized agency that was coming there and like shooting up their home, and helicopters at like 4 a.m. dousing them with water and tear gas, and we're sitting with them and they're like, no, we're still fighting, we're gonna win. We know that justice is going to come. And we were there with people that had never heard that story of what happened there, and we saw them brought to tears. And we saw them so moved by it and so caring, and even though they had never paid attention to that before, they were changed forever. And so reliving that, I mean, if I could go through that one more time, because I know it's impossible, that would be incredible.
just another day that was great because that was definitely the most amazing day during the first part of the tour. I think when we went to Atlanta, we were honored guests of the King family, and they had taught us just so much about what they had learned in their lifetime, what they had learned in just standing up for what's right, not backing down when people push you aside, and just it was also, we held one of our most inspiring town halls that day, in which we had a lot of musicians perform, a lot of young students just playing guitar and singing songs, and even though it was indoors due to, I think it was weather or something, it was really hot in Atlanta, but that was just, the energy in that room was something that I want to feel that 24/7.
I'm gonna pick one from the Florida tour because we did a separate tour in Florida. We went to all 27 districts, and I was on the second half of that. And in Orlando, we went to the Pulse nightclub. There's a memorial out there now, and we actually got to go to the memorial with one of the survivors from Pulse, and it was so cathartic for me personally and for everyone there, because we I think spoke 2 words the entire time and just took it all in and saw all the photos and how similar every single photo was to things that we have experienced, just with a little bit more rainbow. But it was so sad, but it was also so empowering because of how much hope that you see all around Orlando. There's rainbows everywhere. Like, Orlando's such a strong community, and after something so terrible happened there, like they fought and they kept fighting, but they didn't have a voice, and it just empowered me to fight more for them.
Hey, my name is Kat Swaski, and I do some legislative work here in Rhode Island. But I wanted to, first of all, thank you for the impact that your work had on how much easier it became to be treated, the fight to be treated seriously as a teenager at the State House became after all of your work. Really, really amazing the shift that happened.
But I wanted to ask you specifically about legislation that you passed on a state level. Did you find that talking to your legislators was the most effective course of action, or is there some other something that we're not thinking of that's much more effective?
The talking part is necessary, but it's not super effective. It has to be necessary so that they understand and that they're familiar with what your asks are. And they have to be hard asks. It has to be, what do you actually want to see done? Because these people will look for any excuse to not take you seriously. I was in Mitch McConnell's office and his staff said, well, what bill numbers do you actually want? I knew the bill numbers. I came there prepared, but they asked that question because they thought I'd know what policy I wanted, but not specific like SB 2240, because like what 20-year-old would know that? But I did, so screw them. But that's just the beginning. It's all about organizing. It's all about having a force on the ground to really make them feel the pressure. Like what Moms Demand Action does, I see the shirts, is incredible. I mean, to show up in force and see a sea of red, I mean, that's more intimidating than having a face-to-face conversation with a victim's family, because if they cared about victims' families, they'd actively try to stop making more victims' families. Like, they purposely ignore this issue because it's easy for them. But if you organize and mobilize around this issue and around single policy asks, it's impossible to ignore you because their time is up. They see you in raw numbers and they understand how dedicated you are. And just the fact that you know some of your state reps' names will scare them, because they don't want you as a young person to know who they are, because it's easier to screw you over and ignore your issues when they have no face or recollection of who you are. When they see you come up in masses and organized and demanding something specific, I mean, that's why we've been able to pass 60 plus state laws in the last 7 months, because we have been organizing and mobilizing in these state houses. We can't be everywhere, but the kids in Vermont, the kids in Pennsylvania, the kids in Wisconsin that are getting these laws passed, and in California and Florida and Rhode Island has passed great laws too. It's hard to keep track of all of them because this is the year of the most state laws being passed on this issue ever. And so it's all because organizing and mobilizing and having very, very specific asks. And be the smartest one in the room. It's not hard with some of these state reps.
Hi, I'm Tara, and I just moved here from Arizona, and I lived there for 13 years. And once I moved here, it was completely different, because in Arizona, you're allowed to have guns, and it's very useful to have a person in their car to have a gun. And since I am a minority, and my sister and I are young girls, we both would always close our windows whenever my sister would drive me places. And gun control means a lot to me because it was a huge thing to me and my sister and my family. But however, the media isn't covering gun control anymore as much as it should be. So how are we supposed to get the media to understand that this is important to us and that it should be out there and we shouldn't ignore the fact of this?
The largest thing that I'd like to tell you is simply the media just doesn't, first they don't understand how the media works. A lot of the time when they're like, how could this happen? Like with the 2016 election, for instance, a lot of them were just getting numbers wrong, and like they never held themselves accountable to that. But when it comes to issues like this, like a lot of the time we mobilize and we move things through social media, through back channels, through the fact that we just have this grassroots movement all over the place, that just because you're not seeing it on TV doesn't mean it's not being discussed and it's not happening. It would always be nice for them to actually cover these issues because these are issues that matter, but they'd much rather look at the next royal wedding. They'd much rather look at the next thing that the president said that they disagreed with. They'd much rather look at something that's big, flashy, and shiny. But the fact of the matter is that as long as we continue on the ground, as long as we continue to do this work, who cares what they say?
What he said.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Alexis Carrasco, and after learning about one of the school shootings, it's kind of sad that I don't remember which one. I decided to educate myself upon what was happening because I felt absolutely useless. And I learned about a foundation that had happened called Choose Love by one of the mothers of the Sandy Hook. Her child was killed, and one of the systems in it was to implement social and care into school systems and communities, and that also ties in with Kenyan nonviolence. So how can we implement those values into school societies and communities and still have people listen to us?
Our Senator Bill Nelson passed something that was really interesting as like a tag along to one of a bill that passed. It was a bill that had nothing to do with this, but he like got this little thing in there to test run more social services in schools, like to put $10 million into hiring more social workers, because right now there's, I forgot the statistic, but a majority of our schools do not have any social workers, and then on top of that, more schools have like nowhere near the amount that is necessary to actually deal with the students. And so I think a lot of that has to just be funded by the federal government and by the state government to actually have people in schools that can deal with people who are dealing with trauma or stress or mental illness of any kind. Because I knew when I was growing up, I had nowhere to go in school if I was feeling like things were going wrong or to properly report things. A lot of the time, they are told not to take responsibility. And I think better funding in these schools to have programs that actually teach people how to be more compassionate and have a place to go and to talk through these issues and to have conflict mediation. One of the most successful ways to end gun violence in the inner city is violence intervention programs, and adapting those into schools would be life-saving. And so it is a multifaceted issue, but we need to show people that, like, the data is now there in the last few years through these violence interruption programs that they work, and it's just about presenting those to people who actually care about facts and having people in office that care about facts and real solutions instead of talking about things that don't actually add up to helping people. And so a lot of it is about electing people to local office and state office that represent our values and listen to facts. But on top of that, it's also about like just having that sort of attention to know that this is a problem, that there are no facilities for this. If it's easier to get a gun than it is to get mental health care, then there's something wrong in your community.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Gina Scala. I was just starting to do a project on the freedom riders, and you guys mentioned them. And the most important thing that I read about them was their ability to remain peaceful in violence, danger, and ignorance. So I was just wondering, with all of the things that you guys face day to day, the things that people say to you, how do you guys almost train each other how to remain peaceful?
I don't know. I think just the fact that we know that we're doing the right thing and that in the face of all of the adversity, we kind of try and laugh it off. Like when people are throwing very vulgar and nasty things in our way and saying terrible things to us, we kind of just laugh it off because we know that in the end we're doing the right thing and we have each other and they can't stop all of us.
When we were in Salt Lake City for the tour, after everybody else had gone off to the side because we had pizza and drinks and things, and we were hanging out with the local chapter, a lot of young students there. Everybody else had went off. I was still speaking to some of the people after our town hall, and some of them were genuine Nazis. And these people had stared me down. They were threatening me a bunch of times, in which I just couldn't take it seriously, because I know if I got a Nazi that angry, I'm probably doing the right thing.
Hi, I'm Maria Scala. I'm her twin. We actually thought the same question, so I had to re-coordinate that, which is awkward. But the biggest problem I face whenever I on social media, when I retweet things, I retweeted a picture and it said the young people will win, and it was an art piece, and it was Black Lives Matter and LGBT rights and everything. And I experience a lot of people saying, I'm too young, I don't know what I'm talking about, and basically I'm ignorant and I'm sensitive. And I was just wondering how you guys overcome that and basically show that you do know what you're talking about, and that this really is an issue that affects all of us as teenagers and young adults.
Well, I just want to say with that, like the story I was telling with Salt Lake City, even though I was semi-surrounded, there were only about maybe 5 middle-aged white guys trying to look me down the eye. When it comes to online, they hide behind that wall of anonymity, and yes, words. They hide behind that screen. They know that you will probably never meet them. They know that you can't really speak to them eye to eye. And you just have to realize that when they are being that hateful, do they really have anything better to do? Do they really have anything that is worth their time other than harassing you of all people? Like, it's really just knowing, like, if you believe in something, if you want to fight for something, and people are just being insulting towards you, like, that is not something that you should have to value in your life.
Yeah, don't waste your time on them.
And it's just about, like, you have, like, how old are you right now? 17. You, at 17, have more access to educational tools than any other time in our life, in the world's history of any 17-year-old ever, right? You have access to all of human knowledge at, like, the tips of your fingers, because you can access these from smartphones and the internet and whatever. My brother said in his speech at the march, he held up his phone, he's like, we have this is all we need. Like, you can be the smartest person in any of these conversations, and when you bring something positive, like fighting for LGBTQ plus rights, and someone comes at you calling you ignorant, I think they're the ones showing their true colors. They're projecting. Like, that's what it is. And so it's just about constantly educating yourself, and trust but verify, and search for the truth with a capital T, because if that's what you're fighting for and they come at you, then they're going to be wrong forever.
Hi, so my name is Nicole Perez. I go to Juanita Sanchez Educational Complex and in Providence. So I just wanted to say Providence has an issue with, like, gang violence and gun violence, so it's something that always happens. There's a shooting recently in front of one of our public schools that affected a lot of students. There's also been, like, a kid who got pistol whipped at my own school. So yeah, I'm involved with a lot of after-school curriculars. I am a part of a kindness crew at my school. I was a part of this nonprofit that empowers student voice. So I'm always active in my community, and I like to ask the students around me, like, how do they feel about certain issues? And since gun violence is something that's, like, very up to date, I asked my classmates, like, how do they feel about this? And, like, one thing I noticed was a lot of the students didn't really, like, care. Well, of course there were some that cared, but it's like gun violence has become something that's common to them. Like, we grew up with shootings in our backyards. Like I said, someone got pistol whipped at our school, so it's something that's, like, a lot of the students go through. So I just have a hard time, like, telling the kids, like, that's not normal. Like, we shouldn't be to school shootings. So I wanted to ask you, what do you think I should do to, like, help motivate my classmates, my peers, to, like, become more active in our district and make it aware that guns shouldn't be, like, something that everyone's common.
Great question. While we were on the road, something that we pride ourselves in on being able to do is we picked up people every stop, like young people, 16 to 20-year-olds, hopping on the bus and coming with us for 3 stops, at least. And one of the people we picked up was this girl, Bria Smith, in Milwaukee. She's 17. We met her at a town hall. She was incredible in the town hall on a panel just like this one. And we were like, come on for 3 days. And she ended up staying the whole tour for 60 days. And she lives in a neighborhood called Harambe in Milwaukee and suffers from gun violence every single day. She goes to sleep to gunshots. And if she was here right now, sitting in front of you, and she heard your question, she would say that what we have to do to make people care is, when it's a room like that doesn't experience gun violence, she says we have to make it real for them. We need them to realize what's going on. But then when it's the only thing that's been real for people, you have to show people that it doesn't have to be. That it doesn't have to be normal. that we can work our way out of it, that there's ways and programs that we can create as young people to combat the violence and not accept it in our lives as something normal. We have to realize our own power in being able to stop the system that has been crushing us for generations and rise up to actually mobilize the people around us that need to care because it's life or death, and that we can make our lives more valuable by coming together and fighting this together because it's not normal. And this is a direct quote from her, and I do not deserve the applause because it's a Bria Smith quote, and I suggest that you guys look her up because she's incredible, and I'm definitely stealing all her thunder right now. But it's like, that's what it is. It's about showing people that know it as like the most normal thing, that it's not normal, that there is a way out, that we can do it together, and that we have strength in numbers.
Hi, my name is Lily, and I'm part of an anti-gun violence group called Thoughts, Prayers, Action, and I just wanted to say thank you so much for doing this tour, and thank you so much for all of the work that you all have been doing. I wanted to ask you guys about like specific policies that you think would be effective in protecting students in schools, and you know, you mentioned before about like mental health support, and also like you mentioned before about Black Lives Matter. So I wanted to ask specifically if you could talk a little bit about SROs, school resource officers, and just in general your thoughts on what you think would be the most effective to protect schools.
Well, actually our policies, we have 10 policy points that we know will curb gun violence on state and federal levels. They're actually in the back of the book. Not like the back, like it's in the very last couple pages of the book. So that those are all proven to work and lessen gun violence and they're all constitutional, like we're not taking anybody's guns. And when it comes to school resource officers, it might make one kid feel safe, but we know that there are kids, there are minorities and there are Black and brown kids that aren't going to feel safe with more police officers in their school. And the thing that I think we all can believe is that what could help students more in school are professionals that'll help them mentally and help them deal with their problems and not cause more problems and increase the school to prison pipeline and all that garbage.
Just to add on to that as well, school resource officers, a lot of the time, a lot of people ask us, should we have more in schools? And that's always a hard question to answer because of the school to prison pipeline, because of all these issues that are implicated into that. So what we really think about is one thing that I got to learn from going to school board meetings and going with school safety meetings that I've been attending just in my local area. A lot of what they've been pushing is threat assessment, is simply just making sure that the intelligence is there, that when you know these individuals, because a lot of the time after a lot of these shootings, this isn't 100% of the time, but there are individuals who have had a history, who have had actual records of being violent towards others, or being just all in all disrespectful, being a bully, being more of a loner, being someone who is just outside of the community and feels disgruntled. And it's really just piecing that information together, like when individuals post things to Snapchat or Twitter or Instagram, having individuals out there having a safety net of systems in which that information is actually collected and acted upon. Because a lot of the time, there have been individuals who will post something and then they close the school because of a threat, because they didn't see it coming, because the people who knew about it and the people who could do something about it weren't communicating. So it's really about making that communication way more streamlined, really making sure, because a lot of these things already exist. There are people looking into these things, but they're not talking to the right people. Like, sadly, with the shooting at our school, this individual had a record. He had been through several programs in the school. He had been moved around to several other schools. The school system knew he had issues. They did not act to help him. They did not actively try to help him. The police had been called on his house. They could not do anything because of legislation stopping them from doing anything. but it's really just making sure if the cops know it, if the school knows it, something is actually done.
Hi, my name is Devin Hitu, and I spoke at the March for Our Lives Providence, and I'm also a member of the Rhode Island Coalition Against Gun Violence.
How radical are you?
I'm 17.
Okay.
So I'm from a small town in southern Rhode Island called Westerly, and the biggest problem I've been getting when trying to get youth involved is that they're afraid to express their opinion. What is your advice for this?
This isn't an opinion, it's a fact. That's the first thing, that there is a truth in this, that policies will do X, or they will correlate with this, and it will stop this much violence and save this many lives. So it's not about an opinion, because we don't deal with opinions, we deal with hard facts. And there's no age restrictions, there's no height restrictions, there's no time restrictions, or zip code restrictions on facts. And so when it's about young people being scared to speak up, my biggest fault to me, and I say this everywhere we go, is that I thought I was doing enough for this issue before March for Our Lives, before the shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. I had posted about every school shooting that had happened, every mass shooting that happened. I posted things. I even made like a mini documentary about like gun laws, like in 2014, because I was a film student. I was like, okay, this is my part. I'm fighting my fight. I'm doing my best. And then the shooting happened at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, and I realized that I had not been fighting as hard as I could. And my ask to people, and I quote Emma on this, she says, fight for your life before it's someone else's job. Stand up before this affects you. And so when people are scared to say their opinions or to stand up, they have to realize, 96 people are dying every day. This is a problem in this country that will not stop until enough people speak up and say their opinion or their facts, right? And so there's a statistic that came to me, that came across my desk a few days ago. 21,000 plus young people will be shot and killed by 2020, by the 2020 election, if we don't do something now. And that's why we're putting so much pressure on November 6th. That's why we're putting so much pressure on registering voters and swapping out leadership, because if we're not acting now, it's literally life or death. And it might be hard for people to realize that when they're in a small town. We're from a small town. Like, no one expected something like this to happen in Parkland. But the reality is it could happen anywhere, and it could affect anyone. And if we're not standing up now before it happens to you, before it happens to whatever community, then we're just letting this continue, and we're letting the violence perpetuate, and we're not actively doing the right thing.
Thank you. I just want to thank you for everything that you're doing.
Hi, I'm Annika Pashkis, and I'm 12. And my question is, so from February 14th to March 24th, it seemed impossible for anyone to neglect you guys and your work. And I was just wondering, after the march, was it difficult for you guys to keep momentum and keep your names in people's heads without something to look forward to like the march, and how did you work through that?
Well, definitely after the march, we were really just trying to piece together the next plan, because prior to the march we had come up with the tour for the summer, in which that had been our primary focus, our primary objective, and a lot of, like I said, how the media likes to look at things that are shiny, that are big. The march is a big thing that they can all point their eyes towards, but something like planning a road trip isn't that appealing for more than one or two stories. So what it really was we were glad to be out of the media attention for a little while. There were definitely days where not only would we be working 20-hour, 22-hour days, we would actually be just like, there would be solid 8-hour blocks where one of us was on television, and that was draining. That was absolutely, it really took a lot out of us. So to be able to actually sit back and not have to just speak to a camera, but to speak to people, really actually allowed us to keep that momentum and actually build it more so. Because we were able to work with these organizers, work with these violence interrupters, work with all of these people that we had just started to meet on March 24th, and actually build out this network that would be sustainable for more than just one day.
I think our best conversations, and the best work that we accomplish is when we talk to people face to face, not when people watch us on TV. That's what the Road to Change was all about. It was about meeting people and showing them that we are just normal, weird teenagers that just want to save people's lives. And when you get to that point, then it's like we're all the same and we're all fighting the same battle.
Just so you know, these are going to be the last 2 questions, okay?
Hi, my name is Han, and I actually go to this school. So I attended the March for Our Life rally way back in March, I think, at the State House, and I was convinced by a couple of my friends to come there, and I came there only just because, I don't know, I thought it was something on social media that was trending. But now that I have like a good look at it, and I can see like all the people affected by it, I'm really hit like deep by like how like harsh it is on those people. And since it is just something trending online, I know, how do you deal with sort of the shallow, it's like disconnect from the internet, like what's happening on the internet and what's happening in real life?
We deal with real life every day. Like, yeah, we're online a lot, but I mean, we're here and we're talking to people like you, and we do this every single day. Like, we're meeting new people, we're telling our truth, we're spreading these stories that we got around the country, and coming to places like, I've never been to Rhode Island before. I love it now, but like this is new. This is like the 38th state I've been to in the last 4 months now, and like our campaign this summer, Road to Change, went to more congressional districts than any presidential campaign in the history of our country. And the online presence is super important because we get to meet people like you, and you get dragged into it because it's a trending hashtag and you get to just put it on your story and it's cool for a second, but it also keeps the conversation going to the unlikely person that may not have been engaged before. And so it's a mix of this online information, like word jumble that we throw out there, right, with all these stories and all the things going on to keep the people engaged and informed, but it's also to just bring like these worlds together, that like people find, there's a headline, and this morning from our book tour event in Vermont, Alex Wind, our friend, did an interview, and he said he's going to Vermont to show people that he's real. And I thought about that while we've been doing this panel right now, because people like to think that this isn't real. They like to think that this issue isn't happening. When I was in North Carolina, I went up to counter-protesters at our event. There was like 8 of them, and we had like 4,000 people in the park, and so they were really annoying, playing really crappy music. And I went up to them and I was like, people are dying every day and we're trying to stop it. And he goes, when I said people are dying every day, he cut me off and said, prove it. And I looked at him like this. And I took out my phone and I went to the gun violence archive and I showed them all the places where people have been shot and killed in the last 24 hours. And then I showed him 48 hours, 72 hours. And I was showing him, I was proving it to him. I was giving him names, faces, stories, interviews, showing him that it was real. And he sat there, and he didn't apologize, but he sat there knowing he was wrong. And I saw the other people that were with him realize, maybe I'm on the wrong side of the street. And so it's a mix of engaging people online, engaging people in person, and just keeping the conversation going any way you can with the tools that you have, because that's the real privilege that we all have, is we have our own circles, we have our own organizations, we have our own places where we go to school that we can use as these platforms to keep this important life-saving conversation going.
Hello, my name is Becca Nutting, and I'm 12. I go to Cole Middle School. So last year, soon after the shooting, the principal told us to give 17 high fives to, 17 high fives for the victims. So high fives, it's like, yeah, we killed people, good job, and it's terrible. So question. Eduardo and I are planning a walkout soon. So, what advice can you give us for it?
Well, that principal probably won't be too good. But
we have a new principal now.
that's the best part of that story.
My notes, get a lot of people, get excited, bring megaphones, get a table or something to stand on so people can see you.
Capri Suns.
Capri Suns.
Always work.
Sunny D, if you can get Sunny D. And tell all the local media that this is going down and where to be. And tell them that it's your show and you're running it, and tell them where to stand and who to talk to and everything, because you can control your own content and you can get people excited. And my thing to you is that, we said it multiple times, they can't stop all of us, right? So if you get enough people excited and you have your speeches ready and you know what you're gonna say when you're on that stage and you're sick and tired of high fives for dead people, then say it. You have the power. You have the power to tell this story that is heartbreaking. That is awful, that it is that normalized, that is the response. And you realize that without anyone else telling you that, and you can use that truth to tell other people, and I'm sure that more people agree with you than think that high fives as a memorial is a good idea.
Yeah. Thank you.
I can't wait to see you walk out.
Can we give them a round of applause?